Hey everyone, it's Crystal from Sober Onions podcast. Okay. So it's season 2. I am almost 15 months sober. I just can't even believe it. If you listen to my podcast, I started this podcast at 100 days and I was a hot mess. Really because I was really trying to figure out who I was, what I was going to do with the rest of my life now that I was present, even in my own brain. I have been going through a lot lately, and I am really surprised at how I have managed to lean on the things that I've learned in the last 15 months. Like, I totally get why people relapse because there are points in my sobriety that it's challenged so hard that I'm that close to picking up a drink. And by God's divine intervention, I don't, because he, acts when I cannot act, when he, carries me when I can't walk. And so I'm just excited to be here, but also, kind of come out of this, like, I had kind of like a 2-month rut, it was like so much self-doubt and everything that was going on in my life. I just felt so low. And I just remember thinking, man, I used to drink over this stuff. And so, all the things in my life are different now. And so I just basically leaned on my program, which works for me. It's not for everybody, but it works for me. And used all of the tools, which we have another, sober lingo tools, right? And those tools were definitely getting in my program and being accountable to my sponsor and reaching out to other women in my program or in my life, and just letting them know how I really was doing so they could pray for me, they could check in with me. And so coming out of that, I'm just really I'm going to say I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of myself for getting through this full blown like depression and anxiety and questioning who I am as a person, why I'm on this earth, and what is God doing, and why do I do this podcast, and why do I stay sober? What's the point? So with that being said, I want to introduce you to my friend, Melissa. So Melissa, you want to say hello?
Hi.
Hello. There, and I'm not just talking to myself, which I do
I'm here.
But yes, Melissa is here, and I met Melissa via Instagram, and I was so attracted to her message because she wrote a book called I'm Sober, So Now What? And I think I fall into this continuously in my recovery is, I'm sober, now what do I do? What do I do with myself? Okay, you tell me to go to a meeting, I go to a meeting, but then what? Like I don't feel like I can have fun, without a drink. I don't feel like I could go to the beach. Like I didn't want to go to the beach. I was like, if I can't go to the beach with a White Claw or a Corona, like I don't want to go. Right. So, right. It's like everything kind of like bogs you down in the beginning because you're just like, I don't know what to do with myself. And then you start hearing all of these stories and you start hearing about how people are making it through and how they survive this and that. And so it really inspired me that you had written this book and that we kind of clicked, which I thought was really awesome because I know a lot of people, but it's like not everybody you really click and you can really be honest with. So we met and we started texting and just encouraging each other during, both of our recoveries. And you are almost 9 months or 9 years. I always do that on the podcast. I always say 9 weeks and that person's like 9 years. So like 9 years. I did that on the last podcast. I think she was like 12 years like sober, and I was like, so since you're 12 months, and she's like, oh, that's a while ago. You are going to be 9 years sober, and you battled with alcohol and drugs for many years. I
Decades.
read your book. Yes. Yeah. And so I just wanted to kind of introduce you and then let you kind of take the floor and tell us who you are and where you're from and what brought you to this world of recovery where you take part in it, where you are recovering out loud and helping other people. I know that was long, so tell me all about you and all about your book and everything else.
Yeah, right. Okay, I'm going to lay it all out there. No, I am so grateful to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity right now. I hope anybody that's listening, I just want to thank you for checking in. It's a great podcast. You do a lot of work to keep us all connected. One of the things that I worried about and would question God about when I felt he was calling me to write this book was, okay, so I'll write it, but then how will it get out there? I talk about in my book, I'm Sober So Now, What? A Journey of Hope and Healing. I talk about in my introduction how I didn't aspire to be an author, and how I kind of resisted the idea to even write the book. But things like this, your podcast, and all the work that you do to put into it to keep us connected and let people share their stories. I don't think people understand how much goes into that. So for me, I feel very blessed and fortunate to be not only friends, now we're friends, but to have this moment to talk and have some of your listeners hear, a little bit of what I've gone through. All of our paths in recovery are different. We all have a common purpose. We all have a common goal, but we all have to kind of find our own way. It's our own journey through it. And so I can't tell anybody how to get sober. I can tell people how I did it this time, because I've had a lot of attempts, right? And this one has been my longest and my most successful. And I wanted to share a little bit about that. I did not want to recover out loud, though. That the part where I was talking about resisting. I work at a church where a priest, I was very new to the church. I had just moved to North Carolina. I was still in the part of my recovery where a lot of my family members were really angry with me, including my immediate family. And it was just a dark, lonely time for me. So when I would go to work part-time at this church while my kids were in school, it was my safe haven. I would just go and work in this little cubicle, and I would just plug away and do whatever they asked me to do and just enjoy the quiet and the camaraderie. Everybody was so nice. They're at church. They're nice. Everybody's in their fields, loving God. And so I was like, this is such a safe haven for me. I just wanted to go there and just be left alone. I was sober for, many years at that point, but I still was like isolating, I guess, in a way. And the path that I took was through, there was a lot of different steps, but essentially I was in a 12-step program through AA, and anonymity is very important. So it was ingrained into me from the very beginning that you do not promote yourself in that way. You don't do that kind of stuff. Now, if you know that somebody is in recovery and they come to you and you share your story and you help them, that is our purpose, is to get sober and help other people get sober. But I never heard of such a thing that you get on podcasts or radio shows or write a book about it, or walk down the street and say, oh, you're struggling. I've been there too. So it was foreign to me and I didn't want to do it. I thought, God, how could you be asking me to give up my anonymity? I just planned on living a dual life for the rest of my life and sit in my little cubicle and be perfectly fine. But it didn't work out that way, because I ended up listening to what I believe was God calling me to do, was write and share my story. And so I did just that. I started writing here and there when I could. My daughter would be at softball practices and I'd sit in the car and I would write on my phone. And I even started off secretly, not a lot. I think one priest and maybe my mentor knew that that's what I was doing. And then eventually I started getting comfortable, and then I'd whip out a laptop, and then I was like, okay, maybe I am going to be an author. I don't know. So I kind of like went through this whole song and dance about, am I writing a book? Am I not? I don't know. And until a manuscript was formed, and I started giving it out to people that I trust at church, some of the parishioners and some of my coworkers, and they loved it. And they're like, no, this is good stuff. And these are people that will tell me if it's not good stuff. Right? Those are the people. Yeah. Those are the people you want the feedback from, though. And I was terrified. And And some of them actually didn't really know a lot about my story. The priest that called me to recover out loud, he knew a lot because, he is who I did a lot of spiritual growth with over the last couple of years. And so I would have to dig down deep and tell some stuff. And, you work the 12 steps. And so I did my fourth step. You do it over and over again. You don't just get through it and you're like, okay, I'm sober now. You keep doing the work. And so by the time I got to him, the onion layers. I love your podcast name. A lot of the layers had
peeling away at the layers. Yeah.
So it took years.
Yeah.
I had a lot of layers.
That was God. Like I literally sober onions came to me, right? Because I was trying to think. And my mom, everybody, she's probably gonna be upset that I said my mom, but everyone said, onions, nah. And I was like, man, I was doubting myself down. I was like, I'm going for it. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad.
Yeah, because that's exactly what it was. And when I had 2 decades of substance abuse. And in my book, I do share, I just want to let your listeners know, if you buy my book, this is not a memoir of all the good deeds, of all the nasty, dirty things that I did. I'm not romanticizing my journey or my rock bottom. I do share enough of it to qualify who I am and what I've walked through, because nobody's going to read a story from somebody that doesn't have the experience of the alcoholism or the addiction. So I do have to share some things, but the main purpose of it isn't to focus on all of the dirt and the nitty gritty. Is to bring inspiration and show that this is where I came from. And this is what I was able to accomplish through sobriety and spiritual growth. And so anyways, working with Father Peter, he, once a lot of the layers were kind of peeled off, I got into some really, really dark stuff. So writing the book was difficult because I was having to revisit stuff that I thought I had already worked through. But it was beautiful because not only was I healing as I was writing, by revisiting it, but I was pouring my soul out onto the pages. And my idea is that when I'm talking to you through these pages, you should feel as if that you've made a new friend, because I am. I'm being your friend in this book. It's just like if we had met at a meeting and went to have a coffee together afterwards, or, we've met, we call each other on the phone. I go through some things that I found along the way that were hardships for me, how I worked through them. And then I pack in some information that I think is important for people to know that a lot of the quit literature doesn't focus on, such as breaking the stigma of addiction and relapse prevention. That's like a major topic that needs to be addressed and discussed. And so that was my idea with it, is to focus on some of the stuff that can help, not tell you how to do it. This is not a self-help book. It could help you. It could be a self-help book. I don't really know how to classify it.
I thought it was great that, like what you said, the way you write it, like you start out and you're writing it basically like talking to me.
Right.
Like the way you and I are talking, or like the way, kind of like how you would be texting someone.
Yeah.
And, it's like I felt connected in the sense that I was reading it and I was like, this is like her talking. Like I felt like this is your story. This is what you went through, and this is what's happening. And like I read chapter 1, which I thought was great because it's just about really identifying as an alcoholic, which I had a hard time with because I would joke at parties like, I'm having another drink because I'm an alcoholic,
Yeah. What did I say? It's 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah.
Waste not, what not.
Yeah. So it was funny when I was drinking, and I didn't take offense to it. When I finally realized that I was an alcoholic and I identified as an alcoholic, like I know you mentioned in your book, like the courage that it takes to take a chip or to get up in front of people and identify yourself. Like I watch it now because, you know, now I'm, you know, used to it, and I'm acclimated into a program. And, but I see the people who are brand new and they're shaking and they're nervous and they don't even know what to say. I mean, we literally have to say, what's your name, you know, or, you know, and you know, just say whatever and walk away. But it takes so much courage to do that. And you talk about that in chapter 1. And then I got into, it was, I think, chapter 2, where I connected with you because I had severe bad pregnancies. I had really bad pregnancies, and you had a bad pregnancy and were on bed rest. And, you know, just asking God, like, what's going on or what's happening to me, and like there's no answer, you know, and you're just like sitting there like, this is what I was designed to do, you know, be laying in a bed making, you know, cooking a baby, like this makes no sense. Yeah. And you know, that was my life. You know, I had all these aspirations and goals, and I was traveling the world. And then I met this guy in Australia, and, you know, he was wonderful, and I was 18. So of course he was, you know, wonderful. And we didn't have any social media, and we were doing a Florida to California long distance thing. And then we ended up getting married because, you know, you can't have sex before marriage, you know, because that's how, you know, I grew up, like no sex before marriage. And so we got married, right? Like that was a thing. Like back in the day, people didn't have sex before they got married. So they got married, right?
Right.
So like, you're marrying somebody you just want to have sex with. Okay. Let's be honest. Okay. Like my grandma Nan she was married 8 times because literally that was the thing. It was like, you don't have sex for marriage, so you get married. So they'd have sex, get married. And then she was like, okay, that was great. And I'm like, wonder where I get it from. But, you know, it's like, really, you're so young, you don't really know. And then I got pregnant and my body rejected it, and I had severe eclampsia and I almost died. And I got this bitterness in me towards God. Like, really, this is what you want from me? And I held that over my kids for many years. And when I would drink, right, I would bring it up, and I would tell them how tough it was, and tell them that, you know, like they're so lucky to be here because
we gave them life.
Yes. You know, like that is my thing. And they're just like, okay, you know, I remember getting an argument with my youngest, and she was like, if you didn't want kids, then why did you have them? And I was like, I didn't have a choice.
Right. Right.
You know, and so it was, and I got pregnant on birth control. So I was very,
me too. Yeah.
I did not drink in high school or in college. Like I didn't drink until I was 23. And it was after I almost died and I went through all this bed rest. I was reading your thing, same thing, just going through it. And finally I was like, you know what? I deserve a drink because I was good church girl. And, you know, I had these kids and almost died. So I deserve it. You know, I didn't drink in high school, in college, I deserve it, you know? So I really identified with you on so many subjects in your book, and I'm not even finished with it. So I started it and I'm still working on it. I love it. It's even a short book. So I
did that on purpose. I talk about that a lot. The book is under, I don't remember, it's 80 something pages.
Yeah, it's 70. It's like 70 pages. So,
okay. And doesn't that sound refreshing?
Yeah.
Who in early stages of sobriety or with 10 years of sobriety has time to sit down and read a 300-page book?
Yeah, exactly.
Not me. So, even if they made it an audio book, that's still a lot of time to have to listen. So I was like, I knew from the get-go that I was going to keep it small and maybe write several small books. So I've made jokes about like, I at first, okay, so I pitched my manuscript to I'm an unknown author, no agent. I pitched it to 162 agents and publishers and got rejected by all of them. And I'm glad that I got a lot of no's. I wasn't just sitting there wondering, did they have it? Did it make it to them? I got immediate no's. No, it's good. I want to let you know we're interested in this, but you haven't written enough. A book is 300 pages. It was always the same story. It's great. It needs more development. And I was like, no, I don't. You want to hear about love and recovery? That's my second book. You want to hear about remending relationships between you and your children? That's my third book. Do you want to hear about regrets and lost loved ones? That's book 4. Like, I was explaining it and they weren't getting the concept. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to keep trying, because I need to let you know that the 9 chapters that are in this book and the few prayers, and then the steps that I followed, and the page about how to get help, and the beautiful artwork that this artist friend of mine did, that is this book. And it doesn't have to be a big one. I wanted it to be a sit down one evening read, or read in 2 or 3 readings. I envisioned while I was writing it that I was speaking to the people that would be reading it. I envisioned that they would be, sitting in a rehabilitation center or just out of. I envisioned that they were sitting outside waiting for a recovery meeting to start. I envisioned that people would be reading it in the evening after a long day, one day at a time, and that day just really sucked for them. And I don't want it to be overwhelming, and I don't want people to not finish it. There's a lot of good content, and I think people talk too much. I think that writers, sometimes they like to just write and write and write. And I want to be able to share my message in a way that doesn't overwhelm the reader. I thought about you guys as I was writing it. And so that's what I came up with, a cute little short book about my first couple chapters is my personal journey, and kind of tells how I got to where I was, how deep and dark did it get, how did I climb out of that. I talk about my spiritual awakening. The beginning of my spiritual awakening was a year into my recovery, at the hour of the death of my father, who I cared for while he was in hospice. And then, so now what? I kept saying, God, all right, so now what? I'm out of rehab. My dad's dying. My husband hates me. Now what? Okay. So I graduated the DUI core program and got my GED, and I did everything I was told to do. But now what? I'm moving to North Carolina. I have no sober network. I have no job. I have no friends, no family. Now what? And so that was my mantra. And my mantra should have been progress, not perfection, one day at a time, easy does it. All of those ones that we know, because all of those they're honest to God truth. That's why they are out there and they work for us. And they have a history of being said redundantly. But for me, the first thing I would say is, now what? And that's how the title of the book came about. I'm sober, so now what? So it's not for here's what, guys, here's now what. It is just my now what. And I talk about in there towards the end, your now what is whatever you decide. That's the beautiful thing about our recovery. There is no one way. I have friends, dear, long time friends, high school friends, past drinking buddies that are recovering with no 12-step program. I have friends that are doing, I don't know the name of it, where they take a medication and they pace themselves until they don't drink anymore. There's a name for that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. It's not absent. Yes. Yeah. And that's that's the journey that they're on. And I love keeping up with them and seeing how they're doing. I have friends that just went straight into faith, and faith was where they planted themselves, and their sponsors are, what we identify as a sponsor. I have a mentor at this stage in my recovery, but I started with a sponsor, and they have, a leader or somebody that they look to. So everybody that is a beautiful thing about recovering in this day and age, that there's so much information at our fingertips to find out and kind of go, well, that doesn't sound like something that would interest me, or I tried, that didn't work, let me try this. And that we are in a day and age where we are allowed to have a voice. we are, 10 years ago, I don't know that I would have been able to get on here and share my full story without the lady clutching her pearls at the grocery store the next day. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's things are more accepted. And so we're very fortunate in this period to have options for recovery and to be able to speak out loud and to connect with each other is all over the world.
Yeah,
right?
it's crazy because that's why I am so passionate about it. I struggled with, alcohol personally for a very long time, and I was a home drinker. So I would have a day of whatever, being successful in my dance studio or being successful running, a yacht club, whatever it was, I was successful. And then I would go home and I would drink, and I would drink by myself, and I would drink till I got drunk. And then I would come out of my room drunk, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm doing all this drinking by myself until I get this liquid courage to, tell everybody what I'm thinking. And so which
that's a great way to communicate with people.
Yeah, right. But
I bet that went great.
Yeah, the reality is we never talk about the come down, the come down of alcohol. And people don't realize the amount of anxiety and depression. Now there's blackout drinking. Sure. Like there are nights I'm blacked out on the floor, and there's episodes for blackout drinking. There's information for blackout drinkers. I mean, I wet the bed how many times because your body automatically wants to rid itself of toxins.
Yeah.
But when I wasn't passing out and I wasn't, blacked out, I had this really bad mental come down, and that's when I started struggling with alcohol. And I was like, I'm all alone, there's nobody here, I hate my life, I'm screwing it all up, da, 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 da. Do the day again, drink again, and have the come down again. And it's just a process. So when I got sober and I found this community, I was shocked and I was heartbroken, because I was somebody that was plugged in. I was online. I did all my marketing for my dance studio on Facebook, Instagram. I was successful in everything. I was actually a marketing manager for a couple of restaurants. So I was very plugged in with the internet, in my opinion. There were times I Googled, am I an alcoholic? Sure, and it would say I was an alcoholic. There's times when you do that too, automatically you'll get like hotlines and rehabs. And so you're like, oh, a hotline just popped up. That's not me. I'm not that bad. They're going to, they're going to Baker Act me. And then I'll just, which I didn't even know that what that meant until recently. So, the reality is like, we're not talking about this come down. We're not talking about this whole thing. And there's this whole world. And I got sober and I went, you gotta be kidding me. Like, how did I not know about this? Because people were not as vocal about it. And there was a stigma that, if you're an alcoholic, you're a loser. If you were an alcoholic, if you were a drug addict, you were a loser. And so first thing I was like, I gotta tell people I got sober, because this is possible. Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this exists. Like, oh my God, there's so much information. There's so many resources. And I had no clue. Literally 14 months ago, I didn't even know there was sober podcasts. And there's been people podcasting for 6, 7, 8, 9 years since podcasts started about sobriety.
Yeah.
And
a lot. Yeah.
And what happens is we label it, AA, or we label it whatever, and people are like turned off and scared because one, they don't want to admit to themselves that they have an alcoholic problem, but two, it's like, it's like when anything you do, it's like, if you don't know how to do it, it's scary. If I decide that I want to go skiing, which I've never skied, I've always snowboarded, and I decide I want to go skiing, okay, I can put all the tools on, right? So I'm sober. And then I get up at the top of the mountain and I'm petrified because I've been down that mountain though, snowboarding, right? But I don't know how to ski and I don't know what's at the bottom of the hill. And so that's where I feel like the stigma is it's right in the middle there, because we can get sober, people can get dry, but they don't want to take that next step into recovery because they don't know what's at the bottom of the hill. And what it is just stepping stones to get back up. And so,
yeah,
you know, I just was so passionate about recovering out loud and didn't even know there was people out there doing the exact same thing. And so that's like what you said, we connected because we're all doing the same thing. Whether
yeah,
you're going to reach somebody with your book, I'm going to reach somebody with my podcast, somebody else is going to reach them with all their TikTok reels, because I'm not going to do that. You know, someone is going to you know,
me either.
so, you know, it's like,
if you want to hear from me, you're going to have to read my books.
Exactly. So, and there's people out there, there's going to be millions of people that buy your book because it speaks to them, because they read the title and go, I'm sober, now what? And then it says a journey of hope, right?
And healing.
Hope and healing.
Yeah.
So I think
it's funny that you bring up the, I'm sorry. It's funny that you bring up the breaking the stigma, because one of my favorite chapters in the book is breaking the stigma. And it's one of the most important chapters, I believe. And what I do is I give an example of how you can understand about addiction and or alcoholism. We'll just blanket it and just say addiction.
Yeah, which I believe alcohol is addiction. So
yes. So how you can understand whether you are an addict or you are a loved one of the addict or know somebody that is one, can understand that it is a chronic disease. And once you look at my perspective and see how I very shortly, as a very quick example, I lay it out in a way that you can see that it's very simple. Addicts, let me just take a step back for a second. Addicts and alcoholics love to complicate things. We love to complicate our lives while in active addiction. We love to complicate our lives in recovery. Really, that's why the whole keep it simple, one day at a time thing is grounding for us, because our heads get going and blah, 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 and what does that mean? And oh my God, and blah, blah, blah. And so the breaking the stigma chapter is written in very simple terms, that it is a chronic disease, that it has to be managed like a chronic disease. I compare it to other chronic diseases, and I compare how a program of recovery and addiction and a program in recovery of one of those diseases, how they line up side by side, exactly the same. And then by the end of the chapter, you're like, man, you're right. All we're looking for with our addiction is remission. We're looking for remission from our disease. There's a whole bunch of stuff and onion layer peels that are on top of that simple thing that we have to peel away, and we do have to go through, and we have to make amends, and we have to process, and we have to revisit, and we have to do all these things. Over time, it'll happen, right? One day at a time. But we just need to keep our disease in remission. And there are, like I discussed earlier, there are plenty of ways that you can do that. I believe, because of my experience, the best way is the way that I experienced it. And I talk about that. But once you can keep it in remission, you can manage it, and then you can have a life worth living. So when you are upset at your children, you're not coming out of the bedroom drunk and blaring that they are a burden to you because you wish you never had them. You're saying, you're frustrating me because you're out of line and being disrespectful, and we need a timeout. And you can like manage a conversation at a normal level, without all of this